The twin suns of Karath burned high in the alien sky. Their light cast long shadows over the great arena, a monstrous ring of stone and metal built to hold tens of thousands of screaming voices. Dust swirled in the dry air, and the ground beneath was stained dark from years of blood spilled in the name of entertainment. The people of Karath gathered in endless rows, their scaled bodies glistening under the heat, their eyes glowing with cruel excitement. They came for the same reason they always came, to see warriors fight until one fell and the other stood as champion. For them, nothing mattered more than strength. Strength was life, and weakness was death. Today, the crowd expected something special. Today, a new fighter would enter the sands, a creature not of their world, a human. Captain Elias Ward stood at the heavy gates, his wrists bound with cold iron cuffs. He had been captured months ago, taken prisoner during a border skirmish between Earth's forces and the Karath warlords. His ship had been destroyed, his crew scattered, and he alone had been dragged across the stars to this cursed place. He had heard the crowd outside, their roars shaking the walls. He knew what was expected. He was to fight. He was to kill. And, if he survived, he would fight again until the warlord of this world grew tired of his victories. Elias took a slow breath. His dark hair clung to his forehead with sweat, and the muscles in his arms ached from the heavy chains. Yet his eyes were steady. He had fought in many battles, seen many horrors, but this place was different. Here, life was nothing but a game. To the masters above, the gate creaked open, blinding light spilled in. A guard shoved Elias forward and he stumbled into the sand. The noise of the arena hit him like thunder. Thousands of voices screaming, hissing, chanting. They wanted blood. They wanted a show. Across the arena, another gate opened. From the shadows stepped his opponent, a beast of the Karath pits. It was a massive creature, twice the height of a man, with armored skin and claws that dug furrows in the ground. Its jaws dripped with saliva, and its eyes burned with hunger. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena in the alien tongue, but Elias did not need a translation. This was no simple fight. It was execution. The beast roared, shaking the walls. The crowd roared with it. Elias's cuffs were released by remote. A sword was thrown at his feet, crude, heavy, made for show rather than balance. He picked it up, testing the weight. Not ideal, but it was all he had. The beast charged. Elias moved, rolling aside as the monster's claws struck the sand where he had stood. He felt the ground tremble with the impact. His mind raced. He could not match the creature in size or strength, but he had something else. He had his mind, his training, his human instinct. The fight raged across the arena. Elias dodged, struck, rolled, and retreated. Each movement was measured. Each strike aimed not at killing but at weakening. He slashed at the creature's joints, its softer spots, forcing it to bleed, forcing it to slow. Minutes passed. Sweat stung his eyes. His chest burned with effort. The crowd grew restless. They wanted blood, not a dance. But then the beast staggered, roaring in frustration. Elias saw his chance. With a desperate cry, he drove the heavy sword into the side of the beast's neck. The blade sank deep and the creature collapsed, shaking the ground one last time before falling still. Silence filled the arena for a single heartbeat. Then the crowd erupted, louder than before. They screamed his name, though they did not know it. They screamed for the human who had done what few could, slay a champion beast of the pits. Elias stood over the fallen monster, chest heaving, sword dripping. He did not raise his weapon to the crowd. He did not bow. He only looked up at the warlord seat. High above the arena, on a throne of black stone, the Karath warlord reclined. His body was massive, armored in ceremonial steel, his crown made of the bones of conquered foes. His cold eyes studied the human with interest. Servant whispered into his ear. The warlord gave a cruel smile. He stood lifting his arms to silence the crowd. Today, his voice boomed, carried by strange speakers. The human has proven himself. He has fought with strength, with cunning, and with the will of a true warrior. Such a man deserves a reward. At his signal, another gate opened. Two guards dragged a figure into the arena. It was a woman. Not human, but of another alien race, her skin pale silver, her eyes wide with fear. Chains clinked at her wrists and ankles as she was thrown onto the sand. The crowd cheered louder than before. "This prize is yours," the warlord declared. "A servant, a slave. She will belong to you, human, as your reward for victory." The guards forced her forward, shoving her to her knees before Elias. She kept her head low, trembling. She had known only one life: chains, obedience, silence. She waited for his hand to fall heavy upon her, for the order that would make her his. But Elias did not move. The arena grew quiet, curious. He looked down at her, then up at the warlord. His voice was calm but carried through the silence. "No." The word struck like a stone in a still pond. The warlord leaned forward. "What did you say, human?" Elias straightened, his sword still in hand. His voice rose, firm and unyielding. "I said no. She is not a prize. She is not a slave. No living being is." The crowd gasped, hissing, jeering. They shouted insults in their harsh tongue. Weak, they called him. Foolish. A coward who refused a gift of power. The warlord's eyes narrowed. "You dare refuse me?" Elias met his gaze, without flinching. "I fight because I must. I survive because I must. But I will not take part in your cruelty. She is not mine. She is free." The alien woman lifted her head, her silver eyes wide with shock. No one had ever spoken such words before, not in this place. The warlord's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. "You think you shame me, human? No, you amuse me. Very well. Keep your pet then. But know this: you have made yourself a greater spectacle, and the crowd does not forgive weakness." The crowd roared again, some in anger, some in savage joy. They wanted to see him broken. They wanted to see him fall. Elias stood tall, unbending. He helped the woman to her feet, her chains still heavy, but her heart changed forever. For the first time, she felt the touch of kindness. For the first time, she believed there might be more to life than chains. The warlord raised his hand. "Then, let the games continue. The human will fight again, and again, until he breaks, or until he dies." The gates closed behind Elias and the woman as they were led away. The crowd's cries echoed long after. But in that single moment of refusal, something new had been born, a seed of defiance. A spark that could grow into a fire strong enough to shake even the empire of Karath. The chambers beneath the arena smelled of rust and damp stone. Torches burned dimly in the walls, their light flickering across iron bars and heavy chains. This was where fighters were kept when the games ended, waiting for the next day, the next battle, the next bloodshed. Captain Elias Ward sat on the hard floor, his back against the wall. His sword had been taken, his hands bound again with iron cuffs. Across from him, the alien woman sat quietly, still chained at the wrists and ankles. Her silver skin caught the torchlight, and her wide eyes never left him. She seemed unsure, afraid to move, afraid even to speak. Elias broke the silence first. "What's your name?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. "Layara," she whispered, her voice soft, almost musical. "Layara," Elias repeated, nodding. "I'm Elias. You're safe now." Her head tilted slightly as though she had not understood. "Safe?" she echoed, the word strange on her tongue. "Yes," Elias said firmly. "I won't hurt you." Liara's eyes narrowed with confusion. "But I was given to you. You own me now." The word struck Elias like a blade to the chest. He leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. "No. No one owns you, not me, not anyone." She stared at him, unblinking. Her people had lived in chains for generations. She had never heard such words spoken before. To her, freedom was a story, a myth told in secret by those who dreamed of impossible things. Elias could see the fear in her. But beneath that fear, he thought he saw something else. Something fragile, like a spark struggling to stay alive. Hope. Before either of them could say more, the iron door clanged open. A group of Karath guards stomped inside, their scaled armor clattering with each step. The leader, a tall brute with a scar across his jaw, barked something in his harsh language. Liara translated softly. "He says you insulted the warlord. He says you will pay." Elias stood slowly, his chains rattling. "Then let him say it to my face." The guard sneered, then slammed the butt of his spear against Elias's chest, shoving him back to the wall. "Weak human," the guard hissed in broken earth tongue. "Tomorrow you die." Elias did not answer. He only held the guard's gaze, until the soldiers left. When the door shut again, Liara looked at him with wide eyes. "Why did you refuse the warlord?" "No one refuses him. Not and live." Elias sighed. He leaned his head against the cold wall. "Because it was wrong. Where I come from, we don't treat people like objects. You're not a prize. You're not a slave. You're a person." Liara's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She lowered her head, her chains clinking softly. That night the arena above grew quiet, but the chambers below whispered with voices. Other captives had heard the story already, the human who refused the warlord's gift, who spoke of freedom. Some mocked him, calling him foolish. Others in the shadows of their cells began to wonder. If one man could stand against the warlord, perhaps they could too. The next day came with blinding sunlight and the roar of the crowd. Elias was dragged back into the arena. His body ached from the fight before, but his spirit was unbroken. Liara was forced to stand at the edge of the sands, still chained, a reminder of his reward. The warlord sat high upon his throne, his cruel eyes fixed on the human. His booming voice shook the walls. "Human," he roared, "you think yourself noble. You think mercy is strength. But here in my world, strength is power, and power is law. Today you will face a test greater than before. Today you will learn what it means to refuse me." The gates across the arena opened. This time not one but two warriors stepped out. Karath gladiators, tall and armored, each wielding jagged blades. Their scales shimmered in the sun, and their teeth gleamed with hunger. The crowd screamed with excitement, 2 against 1. Surely the human would fall. Elias tightened his grip on the crude sword thrown at his feet. His muscles tensed, his mind calm. He had faced worse odds before. He could face them again. The fight began. The first gladiator lunged, his blade slicing through the air. Elias sidestepped, parrying with a clang of steel. The second swung from behind, but Elias ducked low, rolling away across the sand. The crowd jeered, calling him coward for not meeting strength with strength. But Elias did not fight like them. He fought smart, moving fast, striking only when the moment was right. Minutes dragged into long, brutal exchanges. Sand flew, blades clashed, blood splattered. Elias's arm burned with pain, a shallow cut across his shoulder, but he pushed on. Finally, with a desperate strike, he knocked one gladiator's weapon free. The alien roared and charged barehanded. Elias twisted, driving his blade into the warrior's chest. The body fell with a heavy thud. One remained. The second gladiator snarled, rage filling his eyes. He attacked wildly, swinging with fury. Elias blocked, retreated, blocked again. He felt his arms tremble with effort. He was running out of strength. Then, in a flash, he remembered his training. He let the gladiator strike, stepping aside at the last moment. The alien's momentum carried him forward, leaving his back open. Elias struck hard, ending it in one clean blow. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted with thunder. The human had done it again. He had survived. The warlord rose, his eyes burning with both fury and twisted amusement. "Again you live," he said, his voice echoing. "Again you defy my will. But tell me, human, what is your purpose? Why do you fight, if not for reward?" Elias lifted his sword, pointing it toward the throne. His voice was strong, carrying across the sands. "I fight because I must. I fight to live. But I will not fight for your cruelty. I will not fight to claim slaves. Every being has a right to freedom. You cannot understand it. But one day, you will see. That is why I fight. The crowd murmured, unsettled. Some shouted insults, but others fell into uneasy silence. They had never heard such words. Freedom. Equality. These were not the ways of Karath. And yet, the human spoke them with fire in his voice. Liara, still chained at the edge, felt her heart race. His words were like lightning striking the dark sky. She had lived her life in silence, in obedience. But now, for the first time, she believed in something more. The warlord's laughter boomed. You are a fool, a dreamer, but you amuse me still. Very well, human, you will live, for now. But know this, each time you survive, I will give you harder battles. I will see how long your words protect you. The guards dragged Elias away once more. His body was weak, his wounds bleeding, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. That night, in the dark chambers, Liara whispered to him, "Why do you risk yourself? Why not accept me as the others would have? It would be easier, safer." Elias looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because it would make me no better than them, and I won't let myself become what I hate. I fight for more than survival. I fight for what's right." Liara's throat tightened. She had never known such a man. Never known such strength. Not the strength of claws or blades, but the strength of heart. And in that moment, she made a silent vow. She would follow him. She would learn from him. And if there was truly such a thing as freedom, she would help him bring it, no matter the cost. Above them, the warlord planned darker trials. The crowd demanded blood. The games would not stop. But deep within the chambers of chains, something had begun to grow. Not just hope, not just defiance, a spark of rebellion. The nights beneath the arena were long and heavy. Chains clinked softly in the darkness, and the air carried the weight of despair. Most prisoners slept with hollow eyes, waiting for the next dawn that would drag them back to the sands of blood. But in one corner of the stone chamber, two voices whispered quietly, breaking the silence. Elias sat with his back to the wall, his body bruised from battles, but his spirit steady. Beside him, Liara sat cross-legged, her chains gathered in her up. She still found it strange to be near him, strange that he spoke to her as if she mattered, strange that he treated her as though she were more than a slave. "You should rest," Elias said softly, glancing at her. Liara shook her head. "I cannot. I keep thinking of what you said, in the arena, about freedom." Elias gave a faint smile, and her eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight. "I do not understand it, not fully. All my life I was told we are born to serve, that chains are natural, that obedience is the only way to survive. But when you said no one owns me, something inside me changed. I do not know what it is. It frightens me." Elias leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "That's because it's hope. You've lived without it for so long that it feels strange. But it's real, Liara. No one is born to serve. Not you. Not anyone." She studied him for a long moment. "You believe this with all your heart?" "Yes," Elias said. "It is what makes us human, and maybe what can make others believe too." For the first time, Liara smiled. It was small, faint, but it was there. The days passed, each one bringing more battles. The warlord threw Elias into fight after fight, testing him against monsters, gladiators, and impossible odds. And each time Elias returned alive, battered but unbroken. Liara was always there, waiting at the gates, her eyes following him. She began to understand his way of fighting, not with brute strength, but with patience, wit, and stubborn will. One evening, after another brutal match, she tore strips from her own thin clothing to bind the cuts on his arms. Elias tried to protest, but she pressed her hands against his wounds firmly. "Be still," she said. If you bleed too much, you will not last. Elias chuckled despite the pain. You're becoming my medic now? Her silver eyes met his. I am more than chains. You taught me that. Let me prove it. Elias grew quiet. He nodded, letting her work. Word of the humans' defiance spread through the slave chambers like fire through dry grass. Prisoners of many species began to whisper in the dark. They spoke of Elias, the human who refused a prize, who spoke of freedom, who fought not for power but for principle. Some laughed at the idea, but others began to believe. One night as Elias and Liara sat together, an old prisoner shuffled closer. His skin was cracked and rough, his body weak from years of toil. He lowered his voice. Human, he rasped. Your words, they stir something in us. But words are not enough. If you truly believe in freedom, then show us how. Elias studied the old prisoner's tired eyes. He knew what was being asked. He knew the risk. I will, Elias said, but I can't do it alone. Liara looked at him sharply. You mean to rebel? Yes, Elias said quietly. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. If we are to survive, if we are to live free, we must rise. And when we do, we will need to be ready. Liara's chains rattled as she shifted. Fear flickered in her eyes, but so did resolve. Then I will help you, whatever comes. The bond between them grew stronger each day. Liara, who had once lowered her head in silence, began to speak more openly. She told Elias about her people, their villages burned, their families taken, their names erased. She confessed that she had never once believed escape was possible. Elias listened, always patient, always steady. In return, he told her about Earth, about oceans that stretched beyond sight, about forests filled with life, skies filled with birds, cities filled with voices. He described families that loved, children that played, and people who dreamed of building a better future. Liara would close her eyes, listening to his words as if they were music. Your world, she whispered once, sounds like a place made of light. It's not perfect, Elias admitted, but it's home. And one day maybe you'll see it. The idea seemed impossible to her. Yet the way he spoke made it feel real. The warlord noticed the whispers among the slaves. He noticed their eyes turning not only to the games, but also to the human. This troubled him. During a feast in his high hall, he spoke to his advisors. The human refuses my ways. He speaks of weakness as strength. The slaves watch him, they listen. If he lives too long, he will poison them with his words. One advisor bowed. Then kill him, great warlord. Crush him in the arena before the eyes of all. End his defiance. The warlord's grin was cruel. Not yet. His defiance entertains me, and perhaps it will destroy him without my hand. Tomorrow I will test him again, and when he falls, all will see that his words mean nothing. The next day, Elias faced a new trial. Not a beast, not gladiators, but a choice. In the center of the arena, two slaves were dragged forward, one old, one young. Chains bound their limbs, and fear filled their eyes. The warlord's voice boomed. Human, today you will choose. Kill one, and the other lives. Refuse, and both die. Show us your strength or show us your weakness. The crowd cheered, eager to see the human spirit break. Elias's heart pounded. His eyes darted between the two captives. The old man trembled. The young one wept. Both were innocent. Both were trapped. Liara, watching from the edge, held her breath. Elias dropped his sword. The crowd gasped. I will not choose, Elias shouted. His voice cut through the arena like steel. I will not be your tool. Their lives are not mine to take. If you want blood, then take mine. The arena exploded with noise. Some booed, some shouted in shock. The warlord's grin faltered for the first time. You defy me again, he growled. Yes, Elias said firmly. Because mercy is not weakness. Because compassion is not cowardice. You think power comes from chains and fear. But real power comes from standing together even when the world tries to break you. The warlord's eyes burned with fury, but the crowd was no longer united. Some began to murmur, uneasy. Some even clapped their clawed hands, confused by their own feelings. The two captives were dragged away unharmed, spared only because the warlord could not decide what to do before the eyes of his people. That night, in the chambers below, Liara whispered to Elias. Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with something new. You are changing them, she said. The slaves, the crowd, even me. You are planting something inside us all. Elias looked at her, weary but resolute. Not me. Us. You stood with me. You believed when you could have stayed silent. That's how change begins. Together. For the first time, Liara reached out, her chained hand brushing against his. It was a small touch, but it carried the weight of trust, of bond, of shared purpose. She whispered, Then together, we will see this through. Elias nodded. Together. Above them, the warlord sharpened his plans. The games would grow deadlier. The trials crueler. He would break the human no matter how long it took. But in the shadows below, among the whispers of slaves and the glow of hope in silver eyes, a bond had formed, one stronger than chains, stronger than fear. And that bond would become the heart of a rebellion. The arena's gates were silent at first light, but the air buzzed with tension. Today was different. Elias knew it before he even stepped onto the sand. Whispers had spread through the chambers during the night, carried by prisoners of all species. They spoke of his defiance, of mercy, and of freedom. For the first time, fear was no longer the only force among them. Liara stood at the edge of the arena, her chains removed this morning by a small act of trust from Elias. She had learned much, in the last weeks, how to watch, how to anticipate danger, and most importantly, how to inspire. Together, they had begun to speak softly to other prisoners in secret, planting ideas of courage and rebellion. Today, Elias whispered as they moved through the corridors beneath the arena, we will show them that no one is born to serve. We may not win, but we will make them fear the human spirit. Liara nodded, her silver eyes shining with resolve. They are ready. You have awakened something inside them. Elias's lips curved into a small, grim smile. Then let's make history. The gates opened, and the sun blazed onto the sand. The crowd roared, eager for spectacle. But what they would see was not what they expected. Two massive creatures were released from cages, snarling and snapping their jaws. Behind them, Karath gladiators brandished weapons, moving in a formation meant to overwhelm. Elias faced them with nothing but his crude sword. The crowd laughed, certain of the outcome. But then, subtle movements began in the shadows. Prisoners, who had once cowered, began to slip from the corners of the arena. Hidden knives, small spears, and even stones appeared in their hands. Whispers turned into silent commands. The rebellion had begun. Elias moved quickly, his mind calculating every step. He ducked the first monster's strike, rolled under the swing of a Karath gladiator, and turned to cut down a second enemy before it could strike. Liara, nimble and fast, dodged between attackers, using her knowledge of the arena's layout to trip enemies and create openings. The slaves who had joined them attacked in careful, coordinated bursts. No longer victims, they fought with purpose. The crowd gasped as the impossible unfolded. The human, along with his allies, was holding the arena. The first wave of creatures fell, one after another, despite their size and ferocity. The gladiators grew nervous. Their disciplined strikes began to falter under the combined cunning of human and alien coordination. From the high throne, the warlord's eyes blazed. He leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the arms of his seat. "What is this?" he bellowed. "This defiance will be crushed." He signaled more fighters, more beasts, more death, yet the tide had already turned. Elias and Liara moved, as one, guiding the prisoners with quick signals and simple words. Each fighter knew where to go, how to strike, and when to protect the weaker members. For the first time, the slaves felt what it meant to fight, not just for survival, but for something larger, freedom. The battle dragged on through the day. The arena became a whirlwind of claws, sparks, and blood. The crowd screamed, some in excitement, others in disbelief. They had never seen a human inspire this much courage. They had never seen slaves rise with such precision. Elias's strategy was simple but effective. He kept the strongest enemies busy, drawing them into traps laid by the freed captives. Liara ran between fighters, checking wounds, delivering encouragement, and sometimes stepping into danger herself. Each act of courage strengthened the morale of the group. At one point, a massive Karath beast lunged toward a young prisoner. Elias dashed in front, slashing the creature's leg. It roared, but he held firm, pushing the prisoner out of harm's way. The young captive's eyes widened, and a spark of courage flickered in his heart. Later, Elias found himself face to face with a gladiator who had cornered Liara. Without hesitation, he jumped between them, striking the warrior with precise blows. Liara's eyes softened with trust, and for the first time she saw him not only as a protector, but as an equal partner in this fight. As the sun began to dip, the arena was a chaotic mess of bodies, fallen weapons, and dust. Yet the human and his allies pressed on, moving with a rhythm that seemed almost unnatural. The slaves' confidence grew, and the remaining enemies began to falter under the sheer force of determination and teamwork. The warlord's fury reached a new height. He slammed his fists on the arms of his throne. "Enough," he shouted. "Bring the human to me." A new gate opened, and soldiers were ordered to capture Elias, but the freed prisoners blocked their path. Stones flew, weapons clashed, and in the chaos Elias moved like lightning, cutting down chains, freeing more captives, and rallying them to push forward. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle shifted completely. The spectacle they had come to enjoy was now a rebellion in motion. Many Karath realized that the human had not just survived, he had taught the oppressed to stand and fight. By nightfall, the arena was quiet, except for the groans of the defeated. The warlord's forces had been pushed back, beaten not by raw power but by courage, intelligence, and unity. Elias stood in the center of the sand, his body battered but unbroken. Liara stood beside him, smiling faintly. Around them, the freed captives gathered, their eyes shining with pride and hope. Elias raised his arms to the group. "Today," he said, his voice carrying across the arena, "we showed them something they could not take away. We showed them that no one is born to serve, that together, we are stronger than fear. This is only the beginning." A cheer rose from the freed captives, mingling with the confused, frightened murmurs of the remaining crowd. Some had begun to whisper among themselves, realizing that humans, these small, fragile creatures, possessed something far more dangerous than muscle or claws, courage and will. Liara looked at Elias, her hand brushing against his arm. "You have changed them all," she said softly. "Even me. I have never felt this powerful." Elias nodded. "Not me alone. Us. We fight as equals. That is what gives us strength." The warlord retreated to his private chambers, slamming doors and growling in fury. He had watched the humans survive battle after battle, and now he had watched an entire group of prisoners rise up under Elias's guidance. He had underestimated them. He had underestimated the human. But he was not finished. "Tomorrow," he muttered, pacing in his grand hall, "we will see if this human can survive fire itself. Let the arena be his trial. Let the world see that even courage has a price." Back in the chambers beneath the arena, Elias and Liara sat quietly. The freed captives had been allowed to sleep in peace, if only for a few hours. The air was heavy, but alive with hope. "You're right," Liara said, after a long pause. "Today we fought for freedom. Tomorrow, we may die. But for the first time I feel like I can fight and not just survive." Elias placed a hand on hers. "Then we fight, not for glory, not for reward, but for what is right. And if we fall together." She nodded. together. And so the seed of rebellion had been planted, in the heart of the arena, beneath the eyes of a cruel warlord and an astonished crowd. Humans and aliens had discovered a simple truth. Courage is contagious. Hope is powerful. And even in the darkest arenas where chains rattle and blood stains the sand, the human spirit cannot be crushed. The next day, the warlord would bring his deadliest warriors. He would bring beasts more terrifying than ever. He would test Elias and the freed captives like never before. But the revolt had begun, and the human and the alien woman who stood beside him were no longer just participants in the warlord's games. They were the spark that would ignite freedom across the arena, and, perhaps one day across the stars. The arena was silent before the gates opened. The sun hung high in the sky, burning down on the sands, and every eye of Karth watched, eager for the final spectacle. Today, the warlord himself would enter the arena. Today, Elias would face the ultimate test. Liara stood beside him, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She had grown strong through the battles, learning from Elias not only how to fight, but how to inspire. Around them, the freed captives prepared quietly. This would not be just a fight, it would be a statement. Elias felt the weight of the moment. Months of defiance, of surviving impossible odds had led to this day. And yet, he did not feel fear. He felt determination. He felt purpose. "Are you ready?" Liara asked softly. Elias nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." Her hand brushed against his. "Together," she whispered. "Together," he repeated. The gates at the far end of the arena groaned open, and a shadow fell across the sands. The warlord emerged, massive and imposing, his armor gleaming like black steel. He carried no weapon in his hands. His fists alone would be enough. His crown, made of bone and gold, reflected the sunlight. His eyes blazed with fury and curiosity. The crowd erupted with cheers and shouts. They expected a fast, brutal end, a display of power. But Elias stood firm, sword in hand, his gaze unwavering. The warlord's voice thundered across the arena. "Human, today we settle this. No more games, no more defiance. You will fall, or die trying." Elias squared his shoulders. "I will not fall because I refuse to bow. I fight for what is right, not for your amusement." A tense silence fell over the arena. Even the crowd seemed unsure. They had never seen a human speak with such courage. They had never heard words like that spoken to the warlord himself. The duel began. The warlord charged first, his massive fists smashing into the sand. Each blow shook the ground, and the air trembled with the force. Elias dodged, rolled, and struck back, aiming for weak points in the armor, using speed and strategy rather than brute strength. Liara watched from the sidelines, ready to intervene if needed. She could see how Elias thought, how he moved not just to survive, but to protect others and to outsmart a much stronger opponent. The warlord struck again, a crushing blow that sent Elias skidding across the sand. He rose quickly, pain flaring, through his chest. He could not match the warlord's strength, but he had something stronger: intelligence, agility, and the will to survive without sacrificing his principles. Each strike Elias made was precise. He avoided the warlord's swings, used the environment, kicked up sand to distract and force the giant to misstep. Slowly, the warlord's anger grew. He had underestimated humans. He had underestimated courage. The crowd watched in awe as the duel continued. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a lesson in determination. Some of the freed captives who had fought beside Elias before cheered from the stands, clapping and shouting encouragement. Others, still in chains, whispered to one another, realizing that hope was possible even in the darkest places. The warlord roared, swinging a massive arm, but Elias ducked under it and struck at the back of his knee. The warlord stumbled, almost falling. Elias pressed his advantage, driving him back with quick, sharp movements. "You think you can beat me, human?" the warlord bellowed. "I am power itself. No one has ever defeated me." "I don't need to defeat you with strength," Elias replied calmly. "I win with heart. I win with will." And I fight not to destroy, but to protect. The warlord paused, his eyes narrowing. No one had ever spoken like this before. He had ruled through fear, through strength, through domination, but Elias did not fear. Elias did not hate, and that was foreign to him. Suddenly the warlord lunged again, faster than before. Elias rolled aside, barely avoiding the crushing blow. He noticed the crowd shifting, watching carefully, and he knew he needed to end this duel soon. Not by killing, but by outsmarting his opponent. He led the warlord toward the edge of the arena, toward a series of stone pillars that formed a crude maze. Each step was calculated, forcing the warlord to turn, stumble, and expose gaps in his attacks. Elias struck quickly at weak spots, cutting through the armor, leaving bruises but not fatal wounds. Liara saw the pattern immediately. She moved into position, signaling to the freed captives hidden in the arena corners. Small stones and sticks were thrown to distract the warlord, giving Elias openings to maneuver. It was not a solo fight. It was a battle of strategy, teamwork, and trust. The warlord roared in fury. You think allies will save you? You will fail. You will die in the sands of my arena. Elias raised his sword. I don't fight alone, we all fight together, and that is why you will never break us. With precise timing, he struck the warlord's arm, forcing him to lose balance. The freed captives surged forward, blocking his path while Liara guided Elias through the pillars. The warlord stumbled, his momentum carrying him into a pitfall that had been uncovered in the arena floor during their earlier skirmishes. For the first time, the warlord lost control. He fell into the pit, roaring in anger but unable to rise. The arena went silent. Thousands of Karathais stared in disbelief. The human, small, fragile, outnumbered, had defeated the warlord not with brute force, but with courage, intelligence, and teamwork. Elias did not strike the final blow. He looked down at the trapped warlord and spoke clearly so all could hear. You cannot rule through fear forever. You cannot make slaves of those who wish to be free. Your strength is only real when it protects, not destroys. Remember this. Liara stepped forward beside him. No one is born to serve, she added, her voice strong and unwavering. Every being deserves freedom. Even you must see that now. The warlord's eyes burned with rage, but he was trapped and powerless. The message had been delivered. The arena, once a place of fear, had become a symbol of hope. The freed captives rushed forward, cheering, shouting, embracing one another. They were no longer slaves. They were survivors, warriors, and now they were united. Elias and Liara stood, together in the center of the arena, looking out over the crowd. They had done more than survive. They had inspired change. The Karath soldiers and spectators whispered among themselves. Some were angry, some confused, some inspired. They had seen that strength was not only in muscle or domination, but in courage, unity, and compassion. Liara turned to Elias, her silver eyes shining. You have done what no one else could. You have changed everything here. Elias shook his head. We have done this. Together. And this is only the beginning. Today, they see what freedom looks like. Tomorrow, we make sure they never forget. Above in the warlord's chambers, he seethed. His empire had been challenged, humiliated by a single human. But even he knew, deep down, that something had shifted. Fear alone could no longer hold power. Courage, will, and compassion were forces he had never understood, and now he had no choice but to witness them. Back in the chambers beneath the arena, Elias and Liara shared a quiet moment. They were battered, exhausted, but alive. The freed captives slept peacefully for the first time in years. You are more than I imagined, Liara whispered, stronger than anyone could believe. Elias smiled faintly. Strength is not measured in muscles or victories. It's measured in choices. And today, we chose to stand for what is right. She nodded. Then tomorrow, we stand again. For all who cannot. Together they looked out over the sleeping captives and the silent arena. The human and the alien woman had fought not just for survival, but for hope. And in doing so, they had begun a revolution that would change everything.